my third Write the Docs conference, my first time in Prague. I was also at the Portland conference twice, and I attended a local Write the Docs meetup back in the Bay Area last year. So my role is an engineer. I'm primarily an engineer, and what that means is that for me, documentation is part of my work, but it's not all of my work. And I think for many people in the documentarian community, writing documentation is maybe not 100% of what they do all day. Or the greater documentarian community, there are many people who are documentarians who don't know that they're documentarians because it's not, their job title. And I think that when we don't think that something is like our main piece of work, we don't necessarily focus on getting better at that thing. And the thing that I really love about the Write the Docs community is that we have this opportunity to focus on documentation and on getting better at documentation, which so often in our work is like the side project or the afterthought, as opposed to the main thing that we are doing. And it means that as a community and as professionals, we get to improve our craft. And so I think it's just really special that there's a place for that. I guess the way that I think about it is a developer portal includes API documentation and more. The API documentation, I'm thinking of it as literally like the list of here are the methods that are available to you, here are the signatures of them, here's the data that you can get back, here are little things that you should know about interacting with them. That's going to be sort of the standard reference that you'll keep going back to as you are developing against that API. A developer portal must include that, but must also include all of the other stuff that you would want to have as someone who maybe hasn't developed against that API before. So the how to get started, the why would I use this API as opposed to a different API, common gotchas, common pitfalls, and maybe, in an ideal world, some sort of like additional like help references, or maybe even some contact information connecting folks using the API to the people who can help support them. So I think that any good developer portal will have the API reference within it, but if you're putting up your API reference and calling that your developer portal, you're leaving out a lot of stuff. A developer portal is for the developer. The developer cares about your API documentation, but also cares about you making the thing that they're trying to make. And so in order to make that thing, they will need to know about your API, and they will need to know about all of the other things that they don't even know about yet. And your job as people who are putting out a developer portal is anticipating what developers will need in order to actually use your API, and giving that to them. So I think that if you're going to produce API documentation, there's three things that should either be included in it or that you should do in the course of making it. So the most important thing, I think, for if you want people to just start using it, is code examples. And there are many sort of API documentation generators that will like generate code samples for you. Sometimes they're not great, so having someone actually go through and vet those code samples to make sure that they actually work correctly, that's huge, because it's one thing to be given, like, here's this method, and here's what it's called. For the developer to then have to take that and figure out how to make working code hitting that endpoint it's just a little bit more of a barrier, as opposed to if they can just copy and paste something to just like in their like browser console just to like prove that it works to themselves. that's a really nice way to lower the barrier to entry. So code samples are huge, and code samples in a variety of languages that people are likely to use with your API. Another thing that's important in the context of production APIs, so like if your API is like your company's main product, is having a really clear explanation of versioning. Because if, as your company is changing your own API, if you are not, if you don't have like an intelligent versioning strategy, people who have built their products against your API, if your API changes out from underneath them, that is a really, really good way to lose customers and make people very unhappy with you and your company. And so not only having an intelligent versioning strategy, but also communicating what that versioning strategy is and making it just sort of obvious and intuitive, so that when things change, because things always change, it doesn't catch anyone by surprise. That increases confidence in your API. And if you want people to use your API for like mission critical stuff or business critical stuff, confidence is everything. And so those are the two things that I think are important in the context of like making an API. And then the third thing is something that in the documentarian community we're pretty good about doing, but in the developer community maybe not always. And that is user testing early and often, which means you have your API docs, you think they're great, that's awesome. Go out, find some developers, buy them some coffee, and tell them to spend 15 minutes making something with your API. See if they can do it. If they can't, fix your docs. And do that often. And do that with different types of developers. Do that with developers, like, if you have an API that you want people, that has like, that you want people to write JavaScript against, and you also want people to write Ruby against, test with both JavaScript folks and Rubyists. And yeah, don't ever assume that just because your docs are done and complete, that they're actually done. They're actually done when you, as the author of the docs, have confidence that the intended audience of the docs is actually using them to accomplish what it is that they're trying to accomplish.